has picked us up. So good.
Yay for YouTube.
Yep.
There we go. I don't even know if I've got Discord on this machine. Oh, I have. There we go.
Don't worry, I'm sure it's got plenty of updates to install.
Oh, I would have thought so. I should have started this on Tuesday. Right. There we go. Lovely. Turn off that. Turn off that. Shazam. Ah.
Is that your keyboard I can hear?
No, sorry, my apologies. That is my trackball. That is my my wonderful trackball thing, which I'm just waiting from about 1872.
Oh, okay, fine. Well, just be aware the microphone is picking it up a bit.
Yes,
so.
I normally have my silent mic, my silent mouse, and I haven't got it.
Silent mic.
My silent mic.
Handy.
Yes.
Not ideal for the purpose.
And my favourite person, silent mic. Right, I shall try and leave that alone then. There we go.
Righty.
Are we all alright anyway? It's been a while.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not very communicative for climate-related reasons.
No.
I've had a week in Taipei. How about that?
Oh yeah, I hear a good time was had by all.
I'm just sorting out flights for Vegas for November, and
Yeah, there's one.
and aren't they closing the airport shortly?
Well, shortly in the sense of 3 years, yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought it was like imminent.
It might be sooner, but it definitely expires in 2030. But they're looking at ways of cashing out sooner. But I don't think anything's been agreed yet.
It always sounds like aerobatic practice.
Well, it's because they're tiny little planes. It's a very small airport, and because we're very close to the airport, they're very low down. So it does have that kind of motorbike sort of quality
Yes.
to the sound.
I would better bring one of mine round. That will
One of your
nice big
aeroplanes.
thumpy thump. No motorbike.
Well, sometimes, as people on the podcast have noted, we get US Hercules like things going out, and those really do make a racket.
Apparently, I look like an older version of Andy Burnham,
I
according
do
to
see
William
it.
Kirk.
I think if you change glasses, the illusion would probably be less.
I think it's the fresh shave. I think that's what's done it.
That's true. Yes, that is.
You brought out your
fresh-faced.
youthful vigour.
My youthful what? Oh, my vigour. Okay.
Isn't that a Draytech thing?
Possibly. Draytech. Wow.
Yeah, this was the place in the universe where that might conceivably have got a giggle, and it didn't play here. So
You like the T-shirt?
Well, yeah. No. Not in Riverside, it's not.
Well, it isn't. No. It's all about 720p or something.
that's the aspiration. That's the nominal resolution. That's the best possible.
So, listening to last week's show, and Tim was obviously struggling greatly with his microphone.
Oh God, I don't know where he logs on from. He said he was in a shared workspace, but I think that might have been a euphemism for squatting or something.
Train toilet, is that?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh dear.
Paul Riley saying Riverside click to allow sound. Really? Do we? Mm-hmm.
I think that's for listeners. I don't think that's for us.
Oh, okay.
No, we can hear each other, and we seem to be broadcasting, so that's
Yeah.
good enough as it gets, I think.
Damn it! That's all we're going to get. Yeah.
Pile of Vigors here if anyone needs some. I've got my old Draytech kit. I've just pulled out of the shop. Which
I've got some. What was the company that managed company that Cisco did? Meraki. I've got some Meraki kit without licenses if people want any Meraki kit. Got some switches and APs and stuff, routers.
Yeah, they do seem to accumulate that sort of thing. Yeah,
Well, the problem is when the license fails, the devices stop working, including the switches.
Okay, that's not great. 1 o'clock. In fact, I don't know why I'm telling you guys this, because
Oh,
Hello and welcome to the PC Pro podcast. I am Darian Graham Smith. I don't normally host this, but I am today because I only had 2 4s and a 9 kicker. And with me today, Lee's looking confused already. I have a confused looking Lee Grant.
I have no idea what that reference was.
It means I lost at cards.
Okay, great.
Cards.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but it's nice that you're chairing.
It's lovely to have you back, Lee. You've been away for a little while. Do you want to tell us why? Or
I can tell us, as people who are watching on YouTube will notice, and as Michael Deere has just pointed out on Discord, I'm no longer under the stairs. So we've had a house move, we've had a shop close, we've had a career change for Mrs. Grant. It's all been a bit mad, and it's all happened at the same time. So I'm this coming back here is about the nearest I've got to normality for about a month and a bit. So I may have forgotten what to do, but I'll do my best.
Well, we're very glad to have you back and to still have you on board. And I'm also joined this week by somebody who is no stranger to the podcast, Mr. John Honeyball.
You're suggesting I sort of lurk around in the corner? Well, you're probably right. Yes, good afternoon, and hope everyone is nice and toasty.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Right, that being the case, let us talk about some of the biggest news stories of the week, starting with John. You're going to tell us about AWS and Azure.
Well, those lovely people in Brussels, the EU Commission, is reported. I mean, they haven't made an announcement yet, so this is slightly sort of wrapped in a little bit of the rumor mill is suggesting that they're going to announce some additional terms under the Digital Markets Act. And what they're going to say is that Amazon Web Services and Microsoft Azure are going to be classified as gatekeepers, and that means that they will be subjected to the stricter rules of the EU that come into play for a gatekeeper rather than just an ordinary platform. Apparently this is going to be decided by the end of this year. They started looking into this last November, apparently. And part of the reasons, the rumour mill has it, is that there was some fairly big cloud outages at the end of last year, if you remember. I'm sure we talked about them. And the people in the EU kind of, rather like a meerkat, kind of put their head up and said, oh, what? Yes, oh, really? Outages? That's not good for us. Therefore, we need to get into this. So it wasn't just, of course, that there was cloud outages. It also took out a whole bunch of services that sit on top of those services, if you like. Obviously things like, gaming platforms, Signal, Docker, and a whole bunch of stuff sits on top of AWS. And because AWS and Azure is not hugely useful as a thing, you've got to run services and capabilities on top of it, and those are often from third parties. Of course, Microsoft uses Azure extensively inside its Office 365 and related platforms. So they have decided that that this is not a good thing, and so they are saying that there should be a lot more interoperability and ease of moving your workload from one to the other. So basically, in their almost deliciously naive view of how computing works, they think that if you are a large corporate or a small medium enterprise with workloads running on Azure, you should decide on a Thursday afternoon before going to the pub that actually you would really rather be on AWS and press some magic buttons and a little miracle will occur and there'll be some sort of massive migration happen with no downtime, no data refactoring, no process refactoring, no app requirement changes. And then on the Friday morning, you'll just be up and running on AWS. Now, of course, does that really sound barking mad to you? Yes, it does, because it is barking mad, but then these people don't really seem to understand the plumbing involved and how you actually build a modern 21st century stack of computing stuff. Now, on the flip side, I would certainly say, yes, if you're going to fully use the Microsoft Azure stack, for example, you're going to be using Microsoft Authentication, you're going to be using Microsoft hosted databases and transaction servers and all the rest of the big plumbing database servers and everything else that comes on that stack. So this isn't a simple case of I just want to pick up a little package and drop it over there. It's going to be far more complicated than that, because it is far more complicated than that. But it looks like they're going to announce this shortly, or they're going to announced that they have been thinking about this shortly. Interestingly enough, as far as I can see, neither the EU Commission nor Microsoft have actually commented on this, so we just have to wait and see how far the feathers get ruffled.
Now, before I throw this over to Lee, I just want to. I noticed that, I mean, quite often when we talk about the big cloud players, people say AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud, but Google is conspicuously missing from this announcement. Does that say anything to you? Do you think that's right? Do you think they'll come back and look at it later, or do you think it's just a bit of a burn on Google?
It's impossible to know. It could just be that they forgot that they have it. I don't want to sound too negative on these, obviously hardworking politicians and civil servants in Brussels, but maybe they're just targeting the big two to start off with, and everything else will follow after that. Because after all, if you have got Amazon Web Services and Azure, you can put the fear of God up anybody else simply by having gone for the two big ones.
Fair enough. Okay, Lee, so my perception is that you're not running big cloud workloads on a day-by-day basis. You're more on the sharp end of technology, but I'm sure you have some opinions about this.
Well, I hear what John says. I agree. And I think there is a big case for saying, well, this is completely a pointless exercise because of all the things that John has underlined. But I also think there's a case for looking after your end users, particularly in terms of sort of vendor lock-ins and excessive sort of exit fees and things like that, which obviously don't benefit end users. So I suppose it's nice that the EU is starting somewhere. I agree having that one magic button to export everything and jump platforms magically overnight is a big ask. But with all these big sort of changes, they have to start somewhere. I've also heard a rumour, because this is all to do with the DMA, that they might also sort of bolt some environmental restrictions into some of these sort of gatekeeper classifications of businesses as well, which would be interesting, seeing as what is happening to CO2 at the moment and how we're all sitting in our underwear because it's so damn hot. But I think it's important that you get someone like the EU that does flex its regulatory muscle in these situations, because when you look at the staggering balance sheets of some of these big tech companies, there are very few situations that they can't buy their way out of, and a lot of the time they simply treat the fines that are laid down by Barnsley Council or the UK as just the cost of doing business, or they outright ignore the rules because the regulator in question doesn't actually have any teeth. It's much harder to do that with the EU. But on the other side of that, as we've talked about before, and I know John has sort of campaigned about, if Microsoft, let's say, said, we don't want to be a gatekeeper, we're just not going to serve the EU anymore, and we're talking, obviously, this will never happen in a million years, what would the EU do? Where are the alternatives? So at one hand, they're trying to sort of regulate the only show in town for the benefit of the computer, but they don't seem to have a lot in the other hand to sort of back it up. But like I say, it's got to start somewhere.
I would be a lot more impressed if alongside this EU had announced a full stack equivalent EU designed and built and hosted platform. I know they're trying to do something with something called EuroOffice, which I've been reading bits and pieces about and hearing that it's actually a fairly contentious fork of some Russian office code that they've kind of forked, and now there's a big shouting match going on about the licensing for it. And it seems like one of those exercises that will probably end up spending an awful lot of money and not end up with something that anyone really wanted to implement in the first place. And why the heck didn't they just say, hey, we like LibreOffice, and let's pour money into LibreOffice and make that great? To me, that would have seemed an awful lot more sensible.
There is actually, sorry John, just to cut in, there is actually a big feature on EuroOffice coming up in the next issue of PC Pro that we're just starting to put together. That will be on the shelves in early August, so you'll have to wait until then to.
It could be that my view on EuroOffice is kind of out of date. So
I will say, the politics of it is a little bit complicated, but also it's absolutely not a drop-in replacement for Word or for Google Docs.
Oh, not even slightly.
It is quite a complicated thing. So So the idea of doing that and also trying to run a Euro rival to Azure is ambitious even by the standards of the EU. But I did just want to come back to you on so you talked about the magic button of migrating from Microsoft to AWS overnight and back again if you change your mind in the morning and wake up with with a hangover. But I've got to say, to an extent, what if I hear correctly, you're saying it's not realistic because your Microsoft Azure-based stuff is all tied up into so many Microsoft services. And I just kind of want to say, isn't that the point, though? Isn't it?
No, no, sorry. Let me rephrase it then. What I'm saying is that this kind of back-end stack, sorry, behind a corporate infrastructure is so complicated. It's not like I want to stop using Office and I want to stop using Excel and start using the spreadsheet in LibreOffice. This is an awful lot more difficult, a lot more interconnected between multiple layers, multiple services, and it's not. And there's a huge element that you're going to have to do about risk analysis, performance testing, tuning, your backup, your archive, your data recovery, disaster recovery, and so on and so forth. These are monumental pieces of work to have to try and migrate from one place to another. But I sometimes wonder whether there is this sort of charmingly naive view that you're running something in Azure and you should be able to run that something somewhere else quite quickly and easily, and it really isn't as simple as that.
Well, I mean, without wanting to, dominate the whole podcast with an enterprise-level discussion, though, isn't it business critical that you are able to move away from Azure if and when you need to?
Well, again, I would argue the point that corporates are very good at doing their own risk analysis, thank you very much, and they're able, if they so wish, to build platforms and their infrastructure across a diverse set of platforms if that's what they want to do and they feel is necessary. Trying to force a choice which is unworkable onto people who didn't want it in the first place, don't need it, and have done their own risk analysis around it, does seem to me, sort of somewhat misguided.
Well, I think, a choice that's unworkable being forced on people that don't need it is a strong and, I dare to say, testable position. So we'll see how this plans out.
Oh, absolutely. It's going to be really fun to watch this one go.
All right. Shall we move on?
Yeah.
Because I want to talk about AI, but not in the sense.
Do you really?
No, well, I actually do, because I feel like sometimes we only get sort of doom and gloom and aspersions cast. And this is a good news story about AI. This is about a law firm called Garfield AI. In fact, they call themselves. They made some headlines last year because they were the first AI-based legal agency to be approved in the UK by the Solicitors Regulation Authority. And what this means is that they will use AI to provide you with legal advice much more cheaply than hooking you up with an actual lawyer on the other end of the phone to talk you through your papers, etc. They're in the news again because they've just, for the first time, won an actual court case, or rather, they've helped a client, a lady named Tamiris Kamal Takidia, who was owed £7,000 for freelance work by a company that hasn't been named, and rather than going through the lengthy and expensive process of hiring. I don't know who the unpaid bills equivalent is of Carter Ruck, but rather than going to an expensive solicitor, she used the very cheap self-serve Garfield AI service, where you basically type in the details of your claim, share your accounts, share the dates, etc., and it will generate the correspondence, tell you your options, help you file the necessary paperwork, etc. She did that. The company that was contesting, that was trying not to pay her, filed a counterclaim. The Garfield AI helped her through that as well. And when it went to court, Garfield Law sent a human to represent Ms. Takidia, to the court, because obviously you can't just put a computer terminal in front of the judge. And she won the case, and she got £7,000 that she was owed and incurred only £400 in legal fees. Whereas, although we don't know what the defendant paid, it is noted that they engaged both a solicitor and a barrister to fight the case. So probably not as efficient. And I think this is, a good AI story in the sense that it is actually showing a real benefit to, it actually is, for once, AI helping someone to do something effectively and productively that would have otherwise been prohibitively expensive. Now, Lee, I'm aware I didn't let you get the last word on the AWS gatekeeping story, so how do you feel about this one?
Well, I think we should all give generously to lawyers in need, because clearly the times are changing. I agree with you on the one side. I think this is very interesting, because I think anything that can widen legal access, access to legal help, and and speed up the process, and give some good oversight of costs, I think is a good thing. As you said, the client was owed $7,000, which is a lot of money, and pursuing that through the court is really quite daunting. As especially if the person is worried about it costing them $10,000 to get their $7,000 back. It doesn't make sense. So I think there is a lot to like about this, and obviously Garfield AI, to be able to do this, has had to go through sort of many hoops, and they're fully regulated, aren't they? They were approved and by whichever legal body it was to be able to do this sort of thing. So they're not some sort of fly-by-night mergers. They know exactly what they're doing. Am I right in thinking Barry did an interview with them?
Maybe. Oh, he's not here this week.
No, I've got a vague recollection about that. But so on that side, absolutely all good. Lot to love, very nice. However, we must also recognise that somewhere in this chain there is a high street solicitor who has lost work. So it's not a complete win for humanity here. And if anyone does have kids with a desire to enter the legal profession, I'd probably shove this story under the nose. Might change their mind, be an undertaker or something like that. But yeah, theoretically, a nice win for AI.
But before I come to John, I just want to say my personal utopian view is there are a lot of cases where, and I know this is not universal, but there are a lot of cases where nobody is losing work because previously this freelance would simply not have had the resources or the self-belief to pursue the case at all, and they'd been left out of pocket. But I know that's only, and I know that's not a complete answer. Anyway, John, I'm sure you have some views on this.
I think your point there about almost the sort of the democratization of access to justice in this particular case is a good thing. Even if you're wanting to use it to query and back up the people who you are paying to represent you, because otherwise it's actually been incredibly difficult because you're not a subject matter expert. If you were, you would be a lawyer. Yeah. And so this kind of, and it doesn't matter whether we're talking legal or building regulations or just almost any kind of professional services area where there is a marketable skill and expertise to allow the democratization to the wider public to be able to question and query. The problem always, of course, falls back to the yes, but what if the AI response is wrong for whatever reason? And the kind of noise and churn and difficulty and upset, depending upon where you are, can be significant. And let's not even get into the realms of people who scour Google for medical remedies for the ache that they think that they've got. And if there's now some sort of AI doctor that says, you have got this, and your GP says no, and then the consultant says no, it isn't this at all, but you're sat there convinced that it is, empowerment also has to come with an element of humility, which unfortunately is rarely the case. But in the broader point here, I think it's obviously it's a very good thing. To your specific point about young people getting into the legal profession, applause to my second eldest nephew in his mid-20s or so, who just graduated in his master's or whatever it is, conversion to law that he's done, and has landed a job in a solicitor's firm in Chelmsford. So it is possible to do it. There are still jobs out there. Let's not be too negative about this. But as Lee has said, the ways of churning through documents and finding the interesting stuff. Big AI engines are extraordinarily good at doing that, and more power to its elbow.
Yes, I mean, I want to. One reason why I particularly want to point to this is I think a really good model of AI that other companies can learn from is that one reason I think it's so successful is because it's super ring fenced. It's very clearly defined what it can and can't do. This was necessary in order to get approval from the Solicitors Regulation Authority. So, for example, if you go there, if you go to the website garfield.law, I guess garfield.ai was taken, then you'll see all it does is chase up unpaid payments at the moment. It doesn't have, I have a health and safety concern or anything like that. It's really focused on what it will do. It will never cite case law. They've made it completely only reliant on the very strict statutes that it works with. So it will never, leave you looking embarrassed in front of a judge when you're quoting a made-up case that never happened. It will never do anything autonomously. It will only recommend what you can do, so you have ultimate oversight over what's happening in your name, and it's actually operating always under the responsibility of a named regulated solicitor who is themselves responsible for what it does, and that solicitor has the necessary insurance for malpractice, etc. So you are protected against kind of the worst failings and excesses of AI at kind of every imaginable step. And obviously, as I say, this has to happen to be certified as a legal practice in the UK. But I think it's a really good model that could be used for using AI in almost any context. So I hope to see this. I hope to see more of this sort of thing, while at the same time, obviously, wishing the best to your nephew.
Well, it's that classic. This is how AI should be used. With an oversight. With someone that sort of can recognise when it's gone off the rails. In those situations, it works brilliantly.
We call them the nominated grown-up. I've also got to give a shout out here to where was it here? Ninja Nurse, our one of our favourite friends of the podcast, on our live channel on Discord, saying, given that it's Garfield, I'm working on cat-related puns. I was trying to find something funny to say there too, and failed miserably.
Yeah, it's surprisingly slim pickings for a cartoon that's been around for like sort of 45 years. Never mind. Let us move on. Lee, I would love you to tell us all about a social media addiction case.
Yeah, it's this one's quite interesting. So YouTube via Google has made a sort of an out-of-court settlement with the person known at the moment as RKC in a case which alleges that YouTube and social media firms have designed their platforms to be addictive. Now, this particular, or rather particular to this case of RKC, is that it's a 16-year-old boy from Florida who basically started using social media when they were about 8 years old and became addicted to it. And this led to them sort of losing sleep, depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts. But just before I sort of carry on, if you're thinking that we covered this a few weeks ago, then that story involved an individual known as KGM. And the reason why there's now two of the stories is because they're the first out the gates in what is currently a backlog of over 3,300 lawsuits in the queue in various California state courts, and a further 2,600 cases. These have been brought by individual school districts and states, and that's for the Californian federal court. So all basically along the same lines. So, unsurprisingly, these cases, as I say, are rather similar. The claimants state that features built into social media platforms, things that, I guess everyone uses without really thinking about it: infinite scroll, autoplay, basically the stuff that keeps the content coming and drives the compulsive use. And that compulsive use, of course, for certain people, becomes addiction. And according to RKC's lawyers, these companies have really been strategizing for years to hook children and maximise sort of their usage of screen time. Now, in response, Google told the BBC that it had built YouTube responsibly, working with families to give young people safer, more helpful experiences online. Now, although Google has settled, as we've said, with RKC, I don't think we know how much it's for at the moment. But in the previous case, it was a few million. Meta, TikTok and Snap, who are all also mentioned in this case, that trial, they haven't settled, by the way, and that trial is due to start on the 27th of July, again in California, so we may have a bit more at that point. However, it's worth noting in the previous case, the KGM case that I mentioned, TikTok and Snap did settle, but the jury found that Meta and Google were guilty even. saying that the company's acted with malice.
Quite close, really, actually.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. You can leave that in one in. The company's acted with malice, oppression, or fraud in the ways that the company's operated that platform. And this really is the key point here, because, and I guess perhaps why the cases are working, if you think about it, because for many years, particularly companies in America, companies of this ilk, they hidden behind something called Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which is a wonderful act name. And this basically shielded platforms from the liability of the content posted on their platform. It was their get out of jail free card, really, which basically allowed them to say that they're not responsible, for what gets put onto their platforms. And I think, I dread to think how many times this has been discussed on this podcast over the years. Basically, they argued they were neutral distributors rather than publishers. And, every time sort of anyone tried to do anything, Section 230 was waved in the air and the cases stopped getting to court. But these judgments that have gone through seem to finally call BS on this, really. So, to be clear, these cases are not because a 16-year-old kid viewed harmful videos online. It's because the judge and the jury has deemed that tech firms don't provide adequate parental control tools or have designed an algorithm specifically optimized to feed that exact type of video to vulnerable people. It's the mechanics of the platform that are being called into question rather than the content being put on it. And at the moment, it seems that many legal experts are supposing that this is why the big tech firms are really getting out the checkbooks.
Yeah, I mean, if their strategy is settle rather than allow a legal ruling, if there are, as you say, hundreds of cases backed up, this could be quite a considerable problem. John.
Yeah, I mean, the whole sort of common carrier thing that goes back decades here in the UK. I mean, the defence, which obviously I think probably originated with the Post Office, which is that the Post Office isn't liable for the content that it carries. It's only responsible for the carrying of it. And internet providers have forever been claiming that they are not actually the publisher, they are the carrier. Now, how this translates into a world of AI chatbots and so forth gets extraordinarily murky. And the discussions about protection of children, protection of adults. Let's be quite clear here. This is not only a child protection issue; it's an adult protection issue as well. And if you want to go to the underbelly of the internet, then there's plenty of ways of doing it through all sorts of Tor browsers or whatever you want to do. But the majority of people, for the majority of the time, I guess, are wanting just to sort of get on and do their shopping. As AI becomes more and more built in, and I have to say, as AI chatbots, and let's not forget that there are a growing range of AI chatbots for like company tech support, often of which can be truly atrocious. I was dealing with one yesterday, dealing being the operative term. And in the end, I just basically asked it, how do you peel a banana? Just to see what its reaction was. And it got quite confused. So I think there's certainly a much scope here, and this will not go away. And the problems will just keep compounding. Whether it's actually going to work or not, I don't know.
As I'm reading it, this is not a classic, keep the children safe argument. At least not in its purest form, because we seem to, as a society, have reached an agreement one way or another that certain things are not cool for 8-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 14-year-olds to access, but they're acceptable for mature adults. But in this case, as I hear what you're saying, Lee, it's as much or possibly more about the method of presentation rather than the content itself. It's about you mentioned infinite scroll, about the dopamine hit, and this is tricky. It seems to me this is tricky because, first of all, it differentiates much less between kids and adults. I mean, adults are every bit as susceptible to addictive behavior as kids are, and also it doesn't benefit from that decades and decades, centuries of debate about what is the age when you're old enough to see a naked woman or whatever. It is so Lee's looking around him. There isn't one in your background, don't worry.
Okay,
not
no problem at all.
I think you're probably old enough anyway. But as far as I know, there isn't like such a consensus on how far is too far in terms of interaction elements, which are, I mean, so, you know, the plaintiff here has used the word addictive, but also you could say they're just enjoyable. They're the ones that make you stay. They're sticky. They're the ones that make you want to keep on using the service because you're, you know, in some sense, having a good time with it. And I don't know. I don't know if been able to kind of dig into, you know, any particulars of. Are we going to see? Are the big tech companies worried that there'll be a precedent set, that there will be a new standard for it's okay to scroll, you know, 50 times but not 100?
I did a bit of digging, and because they're settling out of court, we're not getting the full sort of meat and potatoes of what's going on, sadly, because that's one way that certain things can be hidden. So there's no sort of remediation methods sort of being suggested, or improvement to parental controls and things like that. This is purely about the fact that there are these test cases going on where people have obviously suffered immense sort of physical and mental harm through using these platforms, and the jury has decided that the companies are not doing enough to protect them. In YouTube's defense, one thing that was rolled out in this particular case was the use of YouTube Kids, and you know, Google saying, well, you know, we have this for younger viewers and things like that. And again, if you've got little ones that are online with a tablet or a phone and stuff like that, and you flash up YouTube Kids, it is very much an algorithm that is looking into whether these videos are there, and our kids are slightly just past that now. And there were certainly some videos on there that were certainly not what I would put as kid-friendly. That algorithm is not quite as good as it should be, but there's a problem where you get to it's what I've often referred to in my column as, it's either Peppa Pig or porn. And it seems that these platforms...
I'd visit that website.
Yeah.
You have to vote. Which one is this a close-up of?
Absolutely. That you get these sort of kids apps, and they're very good at sort of keeping your 8-year-old, your 9-year-old sort of away from most of the bad stuff. But when you get kids that are minor, sort of 12 and 13, that are just wanting they don't want to watch Peppa Pig anymore, but I don't want to expose them to the full might of unfiltered YouTube, and though I've got things in place to do that. So, but YouTube themselves don't provide okay, let's change this age barrier now for sort of 12 and 13-year-olds. There isn't that sort of differentiation. So my kids have got to use the full version app because the stuff they want to see isn't on the kids one. And I've seen this time and time again with the amount of parental control systems that I use to try and keep my own kids some sort of semblance of safety online. There seems to be this problem when kids stop being kids and start to become teenagers. There isn't enough effort to put in. That's all you can say, really. So, which is why I think these court cases are interesting, because they really are, as you were saying, just honing in on the fact that these companies do not do enough to give whoever is in charge of someone's social media enough controls to be able to do it. In the same way that for years, gambling companies, you know, when the fun stops, stop. Great, thanks for that. I never thought of that. You know, and what you were saying about it's the good stuff that makes us, you know, want to keep coming back. And you could say the same for a bag of sweets. You know, give a 4-year-old a bag of sweets and they will love it until the point that they're sick on the floor. So, you know, because they've eaten 400 of them. So it's about boundaries. So whether we'll get to a point eventually where a judge will say, there's enough of these cases, you're going to have to change something. And this is, you know, what we were talking earlier about the DMA and the EU. You need a big body to be able to say, okay, YouTube, you need to change this. Okay, Meta, you need to change this. But we're nowhere near that yet.
Yeah. But I think the important point here is it's not just. I don't in any way mean this in a glib way. Think of the children. You know, the children concern here is pretty well understood. How you fix it, I don't know, but the fundamental behind it is pretty well understood. It's the other angle which I touched on earlier about adults as well. And you just talked about, you know, the gambling and limits on gambling. You know, there's you can only go and buy so much ibuprofen at once, that sounds like a trivial example, and I don't mean it to be trivial. What I'm saying is there is already an awful lot of gatekeeping that goes on out there that you might not notice, if only for the logical reason that you probably won't bump into it most of the time for most people. And are we going to see this kind of stuff coming in across the board on all platforms for all age users? And is that what we want our internet to turn into? I don't know the answer to that question, but I am concerned that this is not just a children's issue, bad though that is. It is actually an all-age issue.
Well, we found quite a lot of meat on what was a story that, as Lee indicated, to some extent is a rerun of one we already did a couple of weeks ago, but these are certainly big issues that take about 15 minutes to talk about, it appears. So can I ask you just very, very quickly, therefore, to mention the other social media news concerning trusted news sources?
Yeah, and there isn't a lot to say on this, really. Basically, it's the Department of Culture is basically considering, underlying the considering, forcing social media companies to prioritise what is deemed as trusted news sources, basically just to tighten up the content that appears on sort of things like Facebook, YouTube. So they're talking about getting more stuff from places like the BBC, ITV, Channel 4, rather than whatever.com, which put all those adverts you'll never guess what Barry Collins looks like today, click here, and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, there really is nothing more to say about them, but it's basically just an attempt to just smarten up the content and get some decent stuff out there. But obviously it is a clickbait market and things like that, so whether that will just force the trusted news sources to do that, who will know? But yeah, it is a proposal, and there is not a lot else to it at the moment.
And there's the obvious point here, which is what defines being a trusted news source.
Yes.
You know, there's a lot of people out there, rightly or wrongly, who will say that BBC News is the vehicle of the devil and it's completely untrustworthy. There are people who will say exactly the same about the Telegraph or the Guardian or anything else. And why should we have a government department that is regulating what is deemed to be trusted news? That to me sounds really quite Orwellian in some ways.
Yeah, this sounds like the sort of thing that would give J.D. Vance a stroke, and for that reason, I'm in favour. If I can keep us moving along, I'm afraid, because we've found so much in this. Go away, doorbell. If I can keep us moving along, I'm afraid. John, you would love to tell us about AI-powered filmmaking.
Yes, AI stuff, filmmaking, pro stuff, and a bit of a micro rant, which won't go on for long, I promise. So a company called A24 and Google are doing an AI research partnership to see how this independent studio, A24, can use Google DeepMind to build new AI-powered technologies and capabilities for filmmakers. Quite exactly how your Hollywood lovey is going to respond to this, the idea of tools that can take existing franchises and build new content from it is unknown at the moment. But the discussion point about digital image rights and so forth of actors has been a topic for a long time, and I guess it's only going to get more and more relevant. Especially if I can be so blunt as to when an actor dies. Was it Peter Cushing in
Major
Star
role
Wars?
in
Major
Rogue
role,
One,
where he was unfortunately no longer with us to either complete the film or to...
Oh no, he died like decades before it was
Oh,
shot.
right, okay. But wasn't there recently an actor who died in the middle of the filming and they used AI to complete... Doesn't matter. The point is obvious here, which is, will a film not get made if its insurers can't ensure that they can complete the film with or without the leading talent? It's a significant risk. Anyway, they're going to start building tools on this front. Now, one good piece of news, which I'm going to sit here and cheer on, the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers, SMPTE, if you are a nerd, you will have heard of something like simply timecode, which is the timecode used on video and film. The SMPTE is a technical organization hugely impactful on the whole of how all of this stuff works and plugs together. And they have got technical papers, libraries, and and a whole bunch of stuff, which is the absolute glue of how Pro Video, Pro Audio, Pro TV, etc., satellite stuff all plugs together. They have just announced that their entire library of all of their documentation is now free and available to anybody to download for any purpose. They've basically said charging $100 or $150 for a scrappy few pages long PDF of a scan of a 30-year-old piece of laser print is not good for anybody. They've said that they need to open this up so anybody can download any specification. And this really matters, because if you take something like SMPTE 2110, which is the specification for digital video and audio over IP, if you were at the NAB show, National Association of Broadcasters show in Las Vegas in April, it's something I do every year because it's so fabulous. SMPTE 2110 is everywhere. It's the new way of interconnecting cameras and switches and the plumbing of that world. And if you wanted to create a device that worked with SMPTE 2110 or interfaced with it, whether physically or logically, there was a whole bunch of papers you had to get to make sure that you had all the necessary information to make it work. And that could add up to an awful lot of money. And now it's all free. This is a very good thing. And my rant here is British Standards Institute, which, as a technical test lab, we have to get IEC, ISO specifications for stuff. And they will quite shamelessly sell you for 190 odd quid a PDF file of a 40-year-old specification of something that looked like it was done on a daisy wheel typewriter, and say, well, we have to charge for this because, well, we have to. And it will be really nice if somebody in government could wake up and realise that they've just handed this quango the rights to print money at the expense of business. And it will be really quite nice, thank you very much, if all of these international standards that we had to abide by were actually available for businesses to download and work with. That's my rant.
When I saw that SMPTE story, I had a suspicion that John might like to talk about it. Without getting too much into the weeds of it, Lee, are you happy about the potential of AI and open standards, or are you a bit more conservative about what this means for the industry?
I'm a bit pulled because, on the one hand, I understand the studio's desire to use every tool in the box, to up the output and up the revenue. Why pay 100 VFX editors when AI will sort of spit something out for you? But if you look at filmmaking as a craft, how does a director feel about putting something on the screen which is only there because it was nicked from everyone else? And I'm not talking about the After Effects licenses I had in the 90s, but great films are made with blood and talent, not tokens and emissions, and there's still something really fundamentally amazing about watching something in real life, that's real, whether it's Tom Cruise jumping from a plane or Michelle Pfeiffer using a whip to take off heads of mannequins. I realise these references are getting old, and the next one's about Michael Crawford hanging off a cliff. So that's, I'll back off at this point. I haven't seen a film since about 1988. But
you didn't need to explain that.
No. But I understand at the same time that there will be some very creative people that will do some great things with these tools, and the argument about where does AI start, where do digital effects start, etc., etc. It's a big subject which we won't cover in this time. As far as the last point about the SMPTE, was it SMPTE you called it?
Yes.
Yeah. I looked at that and thought, oh, that's really interesting, and then I thought, have they done this because AI's already nicked it and you can get it from anywhere and their sales have tanked? It'd be interesting to know.
Well, no, because if I go back to my BSI rant, a couple of years ago, they locked stuff down so you could only have a nominated computer that could download the encrypted file. You can only view it on that computer.
Oh, really?
You can't share it within your organization, having paid for it. So these sort of gatekeepers have been absolutely doubling down on stopping this data sharing. So I think, maybe, yes, you can go and ask ChatGPT or Perplexity to tell you the contents of these standards, but I would not be quite so hasty to assume that was the case.
No, it was just a thought.
Let us move on to the nibs section of the podcast. And now I'm in the chair, unusually. Let me just say, I feel that the B in nibs has of late been very much lowercase and sometimes forgotten about entirely. And under my regime, we're going to recapitalise it. So, gentlemen, please, no more than 30 seconds per story, starting with you, Lee, on a new supercomputer cluster.
Was that a pout?
I was going to say,
It did sound elements of a pout to it, but that's fine. Lee.
have you got a clock in your hand?
I've got seconds ticking up in
Right.
the corner of my screen.
Right, I'll crack on. Okay, the University of California in San Diego has teamed up with Google to deploy a new computing cluster built from 2,000 retired Pixel Fold smartphones. They've made the astonishing discovery that a phone with enough battery on a smashed screen can still have reuse and repurposing potential. Who knew? So they've hauled the motherboard out, bolted it to a PCB containing power supply and Ethernet, and flashed it with Linux. Early benchmarks suggest that 25 to 50 phones in a cluster delivers the same performance as that of a conventional server, which can handle demands of around 75 students, so 2,000 should pack a punch. And this cluster experiment, which is going to carry on for a little bit, will also look beyond the traditional IT applications and explore parallel computing and systems programming.
32, very good. John, any response? Any comments on that?
I think it sounds like a wonderful student project.
Yeah, I mean, when I heard it, I thought, well, this is good, but obviously, like cutting out the boards is a bit hardcore. I wonder if you could do something with, with your 5 spare phones that you have in your drawer, hook them up by a USB to some master controller. I don't know. Anyway, keeping with the briefs, I'm going to talk now a little bit about, where are we? 12 seconds past. An action being brought by which the consumer organisation has been given the green light by the Competition Appeal Tribunal. They're taking action against Apple to the tune of £3 billion because they say basically iPhone users are locked into iCloud because although you can use other cloud backup and storage services, iCloud being part of the operating system has greater access which no one else can compete with. I think that's pretty reasonable and uncontroversial. John, I believe you disagree.
Well, let's see how it plays out. It's another 2 years before it even hits a court. So, there are ways and means of backing up your iPhone, your photos, and so forth to other platforms and doing it for free. All sorts of technologies, apps, Dropbox, goodness knows what. But if the claim there is, I'm going to get 70 quid, so I guess it's drinks all round on John.
Ah, fair enough. Lee, any thoughts on that before we move on?
None at all to keep to this time span.
Love it. John, tell us about AMD memory encryption.
Yeah, it turned out recently AMD has disabled something called TSME, which is Transparent Secure Memory Encryption. And so what that does is it encrypts the whole of memory. So if some nasty piece of malware or whatever is trying to do a cold boot attack or whatever that's got physical access, it makes it much more difficult to break in. They took it away on a firmware upgrade that they silently released and didn't tell anybody about until a few people noticed it and kicked up a fuss. And they've said that, in about a month's time it'll be back.
Very nice. I have nothing to add to that, Lee. Please move on, comment on that, and then tell us the news I know you're really excited about.
This is true. It's the CPUs. I think it's a bit sneaky that they took it away when it was there anyway, and they're going to sort of put it back on. They've clearly been caught with their trousers down, which I approve of. So I shall move on with my next 30 seconds. There's been much excitement in the gaming world as it has been announced that Grand Theft Auto 6 will be released in November. The game will cost basically 70 quid in the UK with an Ultimate Edition priced at 90. However, it's not the price which has got chins wagging, but the fact that the physical package we'll all be able to buy at Woolworths won't contain a DVD, just a code, which sort of makes a mockery of the environmental benefits of not producing a physical product. But it also raises questions once again about ownership and resale. Now, currently in California, Sony is being sued for breaking a Californian law that requires digital storefronts to make it clear to the customer, who'll be splashing cash on GTA 6 no doubt, that they're only buying licenses to the game and not owning the game. And elsewhere, the Stop Killing Game movement, who are pushing for alternatives to companies shutting down game servers when a company no longer wishes to support it, is also up in arms about this because it also happened to an earlier version of GTA. So more on this probably nearer to November.
I feel a bit cruel for asking you to squeeze that into 30 seconds. We could do a whole podcast special on those issues, couldn't we?
And I've got a funny feeling nearer to November we probably will.
Alrighty. Let us move on to John's proposed hot hardware of the week.
Well, I'm afraid to say, chaps, that this is going to be quite a quick one. So we're actually running the risk of finishing early, which will be a bit scary, really. But I guess we ought to at some point, just to prove that we still can. I'm posting in the link now. It's a new tool from Ubiquiti as part of the Unify platform. I bought one a week ago. It's been out for about a couple of weeks. And this little box, this little circular device, is called Vape Detection and Air Quality Sensor. It's 79 of your finest pounds plus VAT. So that's what, £94.80 Inc. It's immediately gone out of stock in the UK store, but it is available in the EU French store. So and buying from the French store is trivially easy to do. So what is it? It's a PoE powered, so it goes straight onto your network powered air quality sensor. And one of its specific capabilities is for detecting the smoke trails of vaping, which of course it may not be sufficiently fine that your traditional smoke alarm won't fire on this. Now, I'm not expecting you to put this into the bedroom of your 14-year-old in your house, but in a workplace environment or a office or even school or whatever, where you want to be cracking down and enforcing rules against vaping and smoking and so forth, this can be a really useful piece of kit. So I've installed it. I've run it. It's really nice. It comes up with a whole bunch of really useful measurements. So you actually get a CO2 rating, parts per million. Currently, I'm at home, but the one that I'm looking at here is in the lab. It's telling me it's 840 parts per million on CO2, which is quite nicely low. So it's nicely nice air quality there. Vape is at 0% because, well, nobody in the lab would smoke in the lab. Temperature's 21.9 degrees centigrade. Sorry, chaps. Yes, I know it's very hot outside, but the lab has to have a regulated temperature. Humidity 44.63. Then there's a whole bunch of air quality things. For example, there's one called VOC, and VOC is volatile organic compound, which is, according to Google, is a broad, diverse group of carbon-containing chemicals that vaporize into the air at room temperature, and these are not good for your short and long-term health of your lungs.
If you've ever painted a room, you'll know about VOCs.
And there's also the other version of it called TVOC, which is total VOC. Then there's an air quality rating, and then it also measures the PM ratings, which is particulate matter measured in micro, they are micrometers, and I can tell you it's 0.4 micrograms per cubic meter of PM 1.0 and similar for 2.5, 4 and 10. So it's a really good, stick it in there, run it off PoE and get a whole bunch of data about the air quality. Now, health and safety might say this is really useful to do, especially if you're trying to lockdown environments and so forth against smoking and vaping. But the broader set of capabilities out of it is also very useful: temperature, humidity, air particle quality, and so forth. I've been comparing it to our calibrated temperature and humidity meters in the lab, and it's pretty damn close, even though it's actually physically in a different part of the room. So you would have to be comparing like with like. It sits inside the Unify Protect platform, which of course the whole of that infrastructure from Unify is free, and there's no ongoing licensing for this. You buy it, you stuff it in, and you run it, and it works. Things I like: it's really good. It's got some lovely reporting, beautiful graphs, great reporting of data, and then you can set up things like event handling. So if the vape percentage goes above 0, you can then create alerts into that platform, which can then go off and do stuff, whether it's fire up cameras or they do a PoE siren or a loudspeaker with pre-recorded things like, take that vape outside or something you could record. So there's a whole bunch of stuff you can usefully do with this. This is not going to be business critical unless you need this kind of capability. What I would say, One thing I'm not happy about with it at the moment is there's no means of downloading the data set to local storage, either as a CSV or something like that. There's no data export for it. However, there is a very comprehensive API interface, and there is also full support into Home Assistant. And so Home Assistant can just connect up to this and pull all the data out and store it within a Home Assistant platform if you wanted to use that. As I said, it's say 80 odd quid plus VAT. If you need this kind of capability, you're getting a lot of air quality measurement stuff for something that's not expensive. It's trivially easy to use, and because of its Home Assistant interfacing, you can pull as much data out of it as you like, and then do what you like with it over time for data logging, plus all the alert management and so on and so forth. Not a tool for everybody. I do get the point, but it's not a lot of money for quite a lot of data, and I'm quite impressed so far.
I have some thoughts, but before I air them, Lee, do you have any questions?
No, John has explained it beautifully. I've been having a look at the product, and I must admit I find this sort of information quite useful. I have a very old first generation Dyson air fanny blade thingy. I'm sure it's not called the air fanny blade thingy. That's why I was fired from Dyson's branding department. But and that does a very basic things like the CO2 and the VOCs and things like that. And often when I've had it running in the shop, it has sort of suddenly flashed up that the air that I was breathing is perhaps not quite as solder free as I would have liked. So this sort of information is really important, and particularly if you are sort of working from home, even to a small sort of sense, when given how much what the temperatures are like at the moment and things like that. It's just I think there's probably more people that find this useful than Unify expected, given that they've sold out quite quickly. And if they could do a version that does have a built-in high-pressure water hose, so they can, particularly for schools, so it can blast the vape out the little child's hand at the same time, I think it'd be an absolute winner. But no questions, but it's intriguing, certainly.
One thing I didn't say is it's actually got an LED ring on it that illuminates and basically gives you traffic light of red, green, amber for whatever parameter you want it to show. So you can set it so that you could visually see whatever is the important parameter for you, rather than actually having to go and fire up the app or look into the website.
Paul William Kirk on Discord has had to ask twice now, does it detect carbon monoxide?
No, I don't see any carbon monoxide on it, no.
Well, I can understand why he would ask that. That would make it brilliant, but of course it's not necessarily a deal breaker if that particular thing is missing. The only thing I wanted to say was it's kind of weird to me the way that they position it as, I mean, if you've looked if you follow the link, it is sold as vape detection and air quality sensor. And that seems like a very strange kind of positioning. Can you explain that?
The reason I think it's not strange is because I am not a chemist, but I would imagine the particulate content on vaping is much smaller than the particulate content on smoking, and so what you might have as a smoke detector, and I don't mean that for the buildings on fire, I mean for smoking detecting. Vape detecting may well be a whole different level of complexity, and this is being sold with that headline on it because obviously with the rise of vaping over smoking, and people trying to claim that vaping is perfectly fine and smoking isn't. I'm not going to get involved in that argument. I can see why they would have done that. Also, I would also point out they do a whole range of sensors, motion sensors, temperature, water, leakage and so forth on their Superline protocol, which I talked about a few months ago, and those are very long range. They can go for hundreds of meters from these little battery powered sensors. So this should be, in a way, it should be seen as part of a platform rather than a standalone thing. But if you need a tool to do this, it's not an expensive way of doing it, provided you have got a Unify infrastructure or a controller or the software, which is free, running to do the controlling. somewhere on the network.
Yeah, I mean, I just would have thought, air quality sensor with vape detection would be to me the more logical way around to express it, because it detects many, many more things than just vape. And perhaps I'm living in, a little bubble here, but vape emissions, I would have thought they were quite low down the risk, the list of environmental concerns compared to some of the other stuff you mentioned. Like
I don't
VOCs
think
can be
I
seriously
think the
harmful.
vape detection is not an environmental concern. I think it's a regulatory concern.
I'd also suggest it's possibly a marketing thing. How can our product come up when someone types in, how do I tell if someone's vaping in my toilets? And off it goes. And it's sold out.
Fair enough. As those of you on Discord will have seen, I kind of jumped the gun and made a poll just as John was starting to speak, so that's already there. But I believe we are ready for votes from, well, as I say, people on Discord should already have voted. If you haven't, get on that now. Lee, do you consider this to be hot or not?
I consider it to be hot. It's a nice bit of kit. It's 80 quid, and I'm sure there are deals to be done if you're sort of trying to kit out a school or an office building. But I as I said, I think knowing the air quality of your air. Stupid, absolutely painted myself into a corner there, didn't I? Is really important. In fact, and this is about the third time I've mentioned him in this podcast, Barry Collins. The changes, as you looking at YouTube, you'll notice I'm not under the stairs anymore, as I said at the start. But I'm now doing my soldering work in a very different environment to what I was. And Barry alerted me to a story where he worked out that his CO2 levels, where he was working once upon a time, were far higher than they should have been. And and that's just a tiny little thing, but when you sort of start to get into these sort of massive buildings now, and as we're finding that are built to keep heat in and keep everything in and keep the world outside, this sort of stuff is important information, and it's not a lot of money, and most places have this the Unify stuff. Just bolt a few in. So yeah, hot.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I've spent most of my life living in inner London or other urban settings, and I've often kind of been a little bit concerned about just the amount of carbon monoxide and, frankly, marijuana smoke that are drifting around in such scenarios. If I had been working, in a shop or something, I would absolutely want them to have one of these. Now I live a slightly more leafy suburban life. I probably won't be investing myself, but I was surprised by how much it does for such a reasonable price. So this has gone from, when John originally suggested it, I was like, what vape detector? What have you been vaping? But actually, to my surprise, I'm going to say yes, hot. John?
And for me, on the CO2 front, I carry around, we actually did it as a hot hardware a year or two back, a little box from Aranet. They do these little CO2 detectors things with a digital paper screen on it, and they last for several years. And there's an app, and you just download all this data into your phone. And I actually carry it with me when I go on business trips and go to hotels and stuff, because if you've had a really bad night's sleep, it can be, at least for me, quite indicative to see what the air condition was in terms of CO2 in the room. And I certainly was getting some quite high spikes on my hotel in my recent trip to Taipei. But of course, this is infrastructure. This is PoE. This is not something you're going to carry with you. But I think it's hot. I think it's not just the device. It's the platform it builds into. And I think it's vaping. I'm not an expert in this field. I've not seen vape detectors in my timeline. And this one popped up, and I thought, well, that sounds like fun. And it's going to be an interesting thing to just data log for a while and see what it tells me. So, everything is a learning experience. So it's hot from me, and I can see why it's gone out of stock in the UK. But it's essentially the same price in the French store, and they deliver it to you with no courier problems or import duties or anything like that. They handle all of that stuff.
Okay, so it's a clean sweep in the studio, and looking at Discord, I see 17 hots and only 7 nots, which is well over a 2/3 majority, so the motion carries. Well done to John for suggesting it, and I guess to Ubiquity for making it. Thank you to John and Lee, thank you to everyone on Discord, thank you to everyone watching on YouTube, thank you to all our podcast listeners who will be downloading this later, thank you to magazine readers, and there's so many people I need to thank, but let us just say for now, on this very hot and lovely Thursday, thanks again, and goodbye for now.
Bye.
Well, I think we got through that.
Well done,
Everyone
chaps.
happy?
yes.
All right. Thanks, Discorders. Thanks, guys. I'm out of here. I'm going to turn my fan on.
Okay, I don't blame you.
Bye-bye.
Cheers, folks. Bye-bye.
All right, thanks all.